My name is Dana Malone. I teach in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and welcome to our webinar and Q&A on the new psychology standards. Just a quick reminder to stay muted, and we definitely encourage people to submit questions in the chat. I will be keeping track of the chat and trying to get those questions down as best I can for the Q&A session. And you can also raise your hands during the Q&A time, and we will try to do our best to get everybody's questions in. So just a few notes on the structure of tonight. I will start off by doing a brief introduction of our presenter, and a reminder that we also have a few other people who sat on the standards committee floating in the call. And Tina, our presenter tonight, will do an overview of the standards and a little bit of information also on how she piloted it this year. And then we'll have time at the end for our Q&A. So welcome, everyone. We are super excited to talk to you guys tonight about the standards. And to start, I want to introduce our presenter, Tina Athanasopoulos. And Tina is going to be presenting tonight. She is an MA and CAS and has been in education, teaching, advanced placement, and regular psychology for 25 years. She's also been an adjunct professor in the education department at North Park University for about 13 years. Currently, she is the division head of social science and world language at Prospect High School, which is in Mount Prospect, Illinois. She implemented the AP Psych program for her district, and the district is comprised of 6 high schools. And that was implemented in 2000, and it is currently their #1 elective in the district. She was also on the test development committee for the AP Psych exam from 2005 to 2009, and has been involved with the AP reading since 2000 as a reader, table leader, exam leader, and assistant chief reader. Tina has been a College Board consultant since 2001, has presented at College Board workshops across the country, and was awarded the Moffitt Memorial Teaching Excellence Award for psychology teachers in 2015. Tina received her BS in Psych and Social Science Education from Loyola, has an MA in School Counseling from Northeastern Illinois, and a CAS in Education Administration from the University of Illinois. And most recently, very recently, Tina received the American Psychological Association's Presidential Citation for her work on the national standards. So congratulations to you, Tina. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Tina, for putting this presentation together. And towards the end of the call, I'll also introduce a few other people that worked on the standards committee. And take it away, Tina.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Dana. I greatly appreciate it. It's always awkward when someone starts talking about yourself and you have to sit and listen. So I'm extremely grateful. I'm grateful for all of you that are here tonight. I love seeing familiar faces. And I know that some of you are new to psychology, and what I could say is, out of any subject to teach, we are by far the greatest subject and the greatest family that you can find. So I hope this is just a small token of appreciation right back at you. So I'm going to share my screen without further ado for my wonderful presentation. Here we go. So one of the big things about this presentation was really just to show what the APA revised national standards are about. And this is for regular psychology. We already got some questions regarding what's the difference between regular psychology and the changes with IPI through the AP curriculum. And so I hope that we'll cover that as well. But really this focus is just for more choice, more flexibility using APA's revised national standards. Again, my name is Tina. Most people can't pronounce the last name. I'm just Tina from Chicago. The objective of tonight's video is just to discuss the revision of the national standards, the vision of the working group, which this was a 4-year process that we went through. I specifically would like to identify and compare the 2011 versus the 2022 standards, because those are the most recent and the ones you've probably, hopefully, have used most recently. I'd like to identify how teachers can use these standards in terms of flexibility, and then reiterate to you, to all of us, of how we can use these new standards moving forward. And so that is my goal and objective for tonight. to start off in 1999, which was a long, long time ago. I started teaching psychology in 1997. And at the time, there were not a lot of resources like there are today. There weren't even many good regular psychology books. Now we are very fortunate to have wonderful books out there. And obviously I saw one of the authors that joined us today online. So in 1999, this was the visual, the graphic that was used for teaching psychology at the high school level. It was more thematic and the focus was still research. I like to call this like the pedal model. I was a first year teacher in 1997. I started teaching AP psychology and regular psychology with not a lot of resources. So I heavily used the national standards in my classroom. The problem today, if you're starting out teaching, we have good textbooks, we have too many resources. And if you Google anything online, there's a plethora of information. So it's the opposite problem of what many of us veteran teachers may have experienced back in the day. But originally, these were the themes that were chosen to be most important. And again, if you notice in the center is methods, referring to research methods. After 1999, the next was in 2005. So it's still that pedal formation. You have methods, but more specifically, they added the units that go underneath each theme. So you still have biopsychological, cognitive, developmental, variations in individual and group and behavior. And below each of them, what we would describe would either be the chapters / modules / units that go along with each topic. Still in the middle, what do we see? Methods, but more specifically, introduction to research methods. So the first 1999 and 2005 versions were more of this flower petal look. Then it changed to 2011. I like to call this like the bullseye. And it was very, very different. At first, people were like, what is this? This is so specific. But what do we notice? In the center, the focus of scientific inquiry domain. These were more domains, social cultural on the far left, top right, cognition domain, and individual variations. So that was around the white circle. In the center, we have the scientific inquiry, but above that, biopsychology still, and developmental and learning domains. Across the entire bullseye or around it in blue is the application of psychological science in general about treatment, health, and vocational applications. So when you look back, it has evolved quite a bit. 1999, more simplistic, then a little bit more detail added. The bullseye was definitely more identified in terms of what they believed to be most important in terms of centered and then broader ideas. And then now we have the 2022 pillar model is what we would call it. No, it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm Greek, with the Parthenon and the columns. This really was from the work of the IPI group. And so this is the introductory psychology courses and the initiative at the higher level in terms of Psych 101. And so we have integrated those ideas, starting with the integrated themes, as well as the pillar model itself. By that, you have 5 pillars going across: biological, cognition, developmental and learning, social, personality, mental and physical, and health pillar. Below each one are the units or modules or chapters, how you'd like to call them. But underneath, what you see is the foundation. You can't have the pillars without a solid foundation. It's scientific inquiry and research methods. So the idea is that we talk about and apply scientific inquiry and research throughout the entire course of psychology, throughout every single unit, not just spend 4 weeks or 3 weeks in scientific research methods and then never talk about it again. That's a flaw to how we teach psychology today. We can do better. If we want to teach psychology as a science and have that scientific inquiry and thinking and critical thinking for our students, we need to implement science throughout every single pillar. And by that, it could be as simple as a research method that you use in biological, cognition, developmental, social, and mental health, which we can easily do that when we talk about research methods. So we have the foundation on the bottom, which we should implement through every single pillar or all units of study. And then you have the units underneath each pillar. At the top, which we believe are these overarching themes, are these integrated concepts that we'd like to thread throughout the entire course as well. These are similar to that you'll see with the IPI group at the college level. And then you'll also see them with the APA content that's reiterated as well, which I'll get to later. So when you look back, again, it's been quite an involvement. So again, 1999, 2005, 2011, and here we are today. So let's break this down a little bit more for us. The vision of the working group to revise these standards, it was a lot. It was a lot of personnel, a lot of differences, a lot of people with different backgrounds. It was a group that was made up of college professors, high school teachers, APA group. And what we really wanted to do is have a seamless transition between high school and the introductory science course of psychology. Myself being a psychology major, I took Psych 1 at my high school when I was in literally high school many years ago. And then I took Psychology 2 like the year after. Sometimes the teacher would teach the same. It was two different teachers. They teach the same concept or the same chapter, which I thought, that's strange. I just already did the learning unit. They did not have AP Psychology as an option for me as a student, but I entered Psych 101 in college and I fell in love with the subject. It just reiterated that. But the concepts that were used in the higher education were a little bit different than that was introduced to me when I was a high school student. Something like the learning theory was really difficult for me to grasp by the time I went to college because I didn't learn some of those concepts at the high school level. So the working group from the summit of July, maybe 2017, 2018, we really wanted to have a seamless transition between high school psychology and college. We really wanted to have design a course for high school psychology that's grounded in science, that demonstrates how psychology can improve society and change lives, and how really we use psychology in every occupation in the future that we might go into. And we wanted to focus on that. And we wanted to have the same vocabulary, same terms, similar themes, similar content across the board. So that was something that the working group really focused on, along with APA's IPI group. So these were the 6 changes that took place from 2011 to 2022. Obviously, number 1, I talked about the model graphic. Number 3 are the domains. 5 are the outcomes. 2 is the themes. 4 is the priority units. And number 6 is standard areas, which I'll talk about each one. So first, the graphic. The graphic is very different. And one of the reasons why we made the graphic change is to align, like I said, with the college level psychology course. Then you had the themes of psychology. In 2011, there were overarching themes. Today, we have 7 integrated themes that are consistent with APA's IPI, student learning outcomes. And these are just ideas that we should be teaching for every single unit or content that we teach. So when you look at them, at first they might seem daunting. Like when you first look at the pillar model, it might be daunting. But when you break it down, this is something we do and our textbooks do seamlessly. A, psychological science relies on empirical evidence and adapts as new data develop. B, psychology explains general principles that govern behavior while recognizing individual differences. C, psychological, biological, social, and cultural factors influence behavior and mental processes. D, psychology values diversity, promotes equity, fosters inclusion in pursuit of a more just society. E, our perceptions and biases filter our experiences of the world through an imperfect personal lens. 5, applying psychological principles can change our lives, organizations, and communities in positive ways. And G, ethical principles guide psychology research and practice. These are topics that we definitely have covered throughout our units, but these could be essential questions or themes that we bring up every day before every unit of what we want to accomplish by the time we finish that chapter or module, et cetera. So what I think is amazing are these integrated themes are shared with the undergraduate psychology courses. They're very similar. So if our students are exposed to just regular psychology 1, because there could be different at your schools, and then they decide to pursue a course, Psychology 101, a general ed class at most universities, they will be exposed to these same integrated themes and these same pillars. So at least the language is similar, that they become even just more ingrained in the culture of psychology. And then we are just building our profession. And this is the top of the pillar model. The domains are a little bit different. In the past, there were 7 broad content domains. Now in 2022, we have 5 broad domains. But one of the differences is that scientific inquiry and research method is the foundation. So that's the foundation for the entire course. And all that means is when you're teaching the biological unit, try and find a way for you to bring up some research methods. When you're teaching cognition, try and come up with some ideas of research. Where you're teaching developmental, learning, social, mental health, etc., do the same. At first, it seems daunting, but when you break it down, you'll actually believe that you talk about a lot of scientific inquiry and research methods throughout the entire curriculum. And so this semester, these were adopted in February 2022. I actually tried it. I tried teaching from this lens with the new domains, and it worked for me and it worked for my students. It wasn't as rigorous as teaching a scientific research methods class or unit for a month and then start with biological. It was easier than I thought, I should say. And I'll give you some examples of that later. So again, research method is the foundation. Sometimes some people, and I've gotten this question quite a bit, we typically are housed in these social science departments. I myself, I'm a social science department chair along with world language. I know it's different. But what that means is we have social sciences. Psychology is a science. We want our students to know that we use data, we gather research and data to say certain hypotheses, whether they're correct or not, or have theses, etc. So in doing so, that's what we mean by psychology is a science, and the foundation should be scientific inquiry. Ideally, it would be great if psychology can get science credit at the high schools. Are we there yet? No. But what we really want to do is focus on the fact that we teach psychology in a sound way that is true to what the higher education classes are doing, and more importantly, to what psychology as a field has to offer in the world, because psychology is around us. We want to get away from the pop psychology of what students or teachers, students might be teaching, and then that is their perception or stereotype of what the field of psychology is, when that actually might not be the right one we want to get across. So right now in my department, psychology will still be in the social science department, and they still will get social science credit. If by chance I didn't have a thorough, strong team that teaches psychology the correct way, I might think about that a little bit differently. But to me, more importantly, and to the working group, is that we teach psychology the correct way, and we teach it in the fact that we do research methods, we do scientific inquiry throughout all of the units of psychology. And we teach it, and we just do a just job doing so. Not that our science department should come and take our psychology classes away. That's not what we're referring to. These are the 5 broad pillars, and these are reflective also of the IPI group as well. So when you might be thinking, well, where did these pillars come from? They actually came for the alignment of IPI, which is the higher ed. But they still always had variations from 1999, 2005, 2011 that were similar in terms of wording. The other thing that was different, which I love this part, is the priority of units. Previously, there were no units that were designated or had an asterisk next to it for a priority unit, meaning teachers can teach whatever they wanted, just ideally just 1 unit per domain. What we have found when you teach psychology, every psychology course looks very different across the nation. It's very different than that of AP psychology. I have found that I can go to an AP Psychology Institute or the AP reading, and our AP courses look for the most part similar. The difference would be block or traditional. That's really it. Or semester versus year long. However, the regular psychology course looks very different. If you're fortunate enough to teach AP psychology and regular psychology, it's like you hit the jackpot. It's awesome. But we had to be realistic out there that there are many teachers that might be thrown psychology and have no experience teaching psychology, and they're asked to teach regular psych on top of US history, European history, and sociology. So here you have a teacher that does not feel comfortable with the background of psychology and is asked by their department chair or by their principal to take on psychology. As we all know, once you start teaching it, you just fall in love with the subject because it's so applicable. That's why those integrated themes are so easy and flawless for us to do for our students. But because many of us, it takes time to become well-versed in the topic. It takes time for us to feel passionate about certain units. That's why we decided to recommend some units as a priority. So in 2022, there are 10 units that were recommended as priority units. And so if you're limited with time, so for example, if your school only has Psychology 1 and it's one semester, what are you going to teach? If you're fortunate enough to have Psych 1 that is a prerequisite to Psych 2, you basically can pick and choose what you'd like. And that's the flexibility that a teacher has. This is a difference. And one of the reasons why that came about, like how did those priority units come about? One, we thought about a teacher that has no supports, that's asked to teach psychology to add their fourth prep. Two, we asked higher ed teachers, which one do they seem to be most important? And we looked at the AP curriculum to see which ones were higher weighted in the AP CED. So that's how we kind of came about which ones we deemed to be more important, or I should say, not necessarily more important, just of priority. So here you'll see the 10 units that are recommended. So for the biological pillar, we recommend the biological basis of behavior. For cognition, we recommend cognition or memory. So this is where a teacher has the choice. If I'm limited with time and I only have one semester to teach regular psychology to sophomores through seniors, because that's the other difference that takes place across the nation, like is our clientele? Our students are our clientele. And you might, if it's all seniors, you might decide to pick different units versus a sophomore. So you can choose between cognition or memory. Developmental, learning, and pillar model. You have developmental unit or learning unit. And then social and personality, you have social and multiculturalism and gender. For mental and physical health pillar, we have disorders and health. So if I were a teacher that only had one semester of Psychology 101, and that's all I got, one-stop shop, I would say, I would ideally try and pick one unit from each pillar, while including the scientific foundation throughout all of the content or all of the units. And in doing so, I feel like I've done a just job for my students if they go on to the university and take psychology or pursue the field of psychology in their future. If I'm fortunate enough to have Psych 1 and Psych 2, well, then it's choose your own adventure. I might decide I'll go biological, memory, learning, social, and maybe health first semester, but second semester, I might try something else. It also depends on, do all your students progress from Psychology 1 to Psychology 2? So all those things can come into play. And one of the reasons why we did this, yet again, just to reiterate, is AP Psychology, you have to cover all the content from the course description. For regular psychology, you have the flexibility and autonomy to pick and choose what you'd like. If you have a good textbook and you have good resources, well, you get to kind of choose which units you'd like your students to learn. We just want to identify those for teachers that need, they get the national standards and they're like, I don't know which one I should do. Okay, I'll pick one of these, but we want to just give them support. So that's what the 10 units of recommendation came from with the priority. The other slight difference was the outcomes. In the past, we talked about performance standards, but today we use the term learning targets. And this really is just a part of understanding by design, which is the main framework people use for instructional design. So it's just the jargon that we use present day. What are our learning targets of the day? What are the learning targets that you want your students to master by the time they finish the unit? The other difference is the standard areas. In 2011, there were 20, and then now there were 18 standard areas. And here they are listed for you. So the one thing I just want you to really consider is, how is your regular psychology course set up? Is it freshmen through seniors? Is it just a senior course? Is it only Psychology 1? Does it move on to Psychology 2? The other question that comes up a lot is regarding the AP Psychology course. So for the school that I currently work at, we're fortunate enough to have AP Psychology year-long. We were traditional 50-minute schedule, but now we've gone to block schedule. And so students have an entire year of AP Psychology. You do not need a prerequisite to enter AP Psychology. For regular psychology, we just recently opened it up 2 years ago from sophomores to juniors for more flexibility and autonomy of choice of student classes. And that's worked very well for my school and our clientele. We have Psychology 1, that's a semester, and it's a prereq to Psychology 2. So we are fortunate to have the ability to pick and choose what we'd like over time. And that may not necessarily be the case in some of your schools. I used to teach in a school that only offered one psychology course. It was regular psychology. And it was where I got to pick what I'd like to teach. And then they had the AP year-long course. So I do think it matters for you what your course is set up like, who your clientele is in terms of the ages of your students. This is what the theme, the pillar model, looks like. So when we tried to do it this semester, as I stated, I was teaching Psychology 1. It was sophomores through seniors. And we tried to play around with this intentionally. And I was so fortunate to have 2 teammates that were like, yeah, let's try this. I'm like, great. So I did an intro to psychology because I feel like there's preconceived notions of what psychology is. And that was kind of like 1 or 2 days. And then I dove straight into, I started just to make it fun for second semester with social psych. And this is where I started teaching social psychology. How do you not talk about research when you talk about social psych? It's in there. You have so much research when it comes from Ash, Milgram, Zimbardo. We talk about ethics in there as well. So that was just an example. For me, it was way more seamless and easier than I thought it was going to be. After social psych, I'm like, all right, well, maybe that was too easy. Let me go biological. So I started teaching the biological basis of behavior. And in regular psych, you can have so much fun. You can do the Plato neurons, and then you could do something else for the nervous system and something else for the endocrine system because you have the time to do so. But I wanted to know, well, how am I going to implement research in here? Again, it was really seamless. I ended up showing 3 Identical Strangers, the documentary, and it talks a lot about case studies and research and ethics regarding the research. It was way more seamless than I thought in that unit as well. So you just have to make it an initiative or a point that, okay, here's my unit. These are my topics. Where am I going to teach about research? What I found is students were more engaged. They were more engaged when I talked about research, when it was applicable to the social psych unit, or when I talked about research or critical thinking, when it was about the biological unit. And so that's when it worked for me. And so you just have to find what topics you feel comfortable teaching and how you feel like you want to integrate the scientific inquiry as well as these integrated themes. This is what our plan is for next school year for regular psychology. I'm fortunate enough to work at Prospect High School. I have Daria Schaffeld as well as Jay Hellman, part of my team. They're great. We want to implement the national standards. So we took them out and we go, okay, what are we going to do next year in the fall? And this is what we decided. We're going to start with intro. We're going to go to biological basis. We're going to go to consciousness, memory in the cognition unit, do learning, and then social psych. If you notice, these are color-coded to the pillar model, just because we are a little nerdy. And then Psych 2, we decided, let's try this. Let's switch it and see how this goes. Sensation and perception. So we're going to combine those two, even though I realize in a lot of units or textbooks, they're taught back to back. So my teacher said, okay, we're not ready to split them up yet. Let's just keep them together. And then we hit biological and cognition, developmental, personality, disorders and therapy, and then end in health. We thought by Psych 2, we wanted to do a little bit more heavier towards the end. The other thing I wanted to just bring to our attention, because I've talked about it earlier, and there were so many people that had questions of this earlier, was about AP. Now, these national standards that we are talking about today are just for regular psychology. Regular psychology, depending on how you have that at your school, I would take them, I'd look at those learning targets, and I would use them to introduce the field of psychology to our students moving forward. Here is from the draft for the AP curriculum, part of the CED from the College Board. And this is part of the course content. They also are choosing to take the pillar model, which was from the IPI group, the Introductory Psychology Initiative group from APA, and apply it to their content. So yes, I think it's important to become well-versed in the IPI's work. I think it only makes you more flexible as a regular psychology teacher. It also introduces these key themes and pillar models to the AP curriculum. And then obviously it opens the door to our students who will be our future psychologists around the world one day. So this is from AP College Board.